Hey, this is Jay Bilas from ESPN. You're watching the Hey Now podcast. Why? I don't know.
Baby, can't you hear my call? I can't stand.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Sims. This is another edition of the Hey Now podcast with my son Jarrett Sims. Jordan couldn't make it. You know how it is when you're trying to get a master's degree. Joining us today is a good friend and a guy that I worked with for a couple, 3 years covering Atlantic 10 basketball on ESPN. Jay Bilas, college basketball analyst, ESPN, Duke player, attorney, outspoken advocate for student athletes. Boy, a big hoorah on that one for sure. He's got the great legal background, and he melds it into being on ESPN a whole lot, especially during basketball season. He's got the dry wit. He's got the basketball knowledge. He knows more about hip hop music than I'll ever know. We're going to get into that. So we're going to have some laughs here and get some really good insights with our good friend Jay Billis. My man, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Dave. How you guys doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. It's a pleasure. We'll get more into this later, but I really enjoyed those 2 or 3 years we did Atlantic 10 basketball on ESPN. We saw a lot of good hoops, and we had a lot of laughs.
We had a great time, and Dave, I think about that often. Not only because it was such a pleasure being around you and working with you, but that was kind of the mid to late '90s was kind of the start of my broadcast career, if you will. And I don't think I've ever had more fun than that period of time. We were kind of running around the Atlantic 10. That was our beat, doing the tournament in Philly, and everybody was so good to us.
Yeah.
You felt like you owned the league a little bit from a broadcast perspective, and I don't think I've ever had that much fun. I have a lot of fun now, but it's not more fun than I had back then.
Yeah.
No way.
Well, I will throw it right back at you. I agree, and I'm still having a good run doing hoops, and I still enjoy the hell out of watching you guys play. I want to when I found out. Well, let me back up. My wife went to Duke for post grad. 86 championship. You guys, your team, your class was just ridiculous. But I'm just curious how you got from Rolling Hills, California. I know you're a pretty good baller, obviously. But how did everything get started hoops wise, and you chose Duke? How'd that work for you?
I started being recruited about my sophomore year of high school, which was 1980. Started getting letters and everything. And then I started getting phone calls and contact with coaches in 1981. And I didn't have a great relationship with my high school coach. So I didn't, I was really in tune with who I played for in college. At least at 17 years old, I was smart. I wasn't very smart, but I was smart enough to realize that college was probably the only time in my basketball life I was going to get to choose who I played for. And so I didn't want to make a mistake there. So this might not be the most intelligent thing, but I wasn't really looking at schools. I didn't much care about the school. I cared about the coach. And I came down to four coaches. It was Coach K at Duke, who didn't really have any sort of track record there. He'd only been there 2 years.
Right.
And when he first called me, I'd honestly never heard of him. Lute Olson
And
was at
why?
yeah, I'd never
I
heard
was
of him.
gonna say, why would you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Lute Olson from Iowa at the time. He was at Iowa at the time. Jim Boeheim at Syracuse, and then a man named Ted Owens, who was an outstanding coach at Kansas. And it really came down to at the end of it. You had four really good choices, but I liked Coach K the best. He connected. I connected with him. He was really honest and straightforward. And at the end of it, I was like, I like him. I want to play for him. It wasn't anything
When
against anyone else. It was just I had to choose one, and I liked him the best.
you said honesty, straightforward, which having done Mike's show for 18 years, I'm well aware. But that honesty connection, what was it? A one or two lines, or just a conversation that said, "Oh, boom, that was it."
No, it was a whole bunch of things. It was a
Okay.
long recruiting process, but there were a couple things that stood out. Like one, everybody that, and I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of schools that were recruiting me were telling me, hey, if you go to Duke, because it got out there that I was really interested in Duke, and it said, if you go to Duke, you're going to play center 4 years and you're not a center. And, I kept hearing this over and over again. So finally I asked them, I just said, everybody's telling me that you're going to make me play center. Is that true? And his response was really honest. He said, for a year, yeah. Like, we don't have anybody better than you to do it. But after that, I'll recruit another big guy and we'll move you over to your natural spot. And he did recruit other big guys, but I never moved over to my natural spot. I played for another 4 years. But he was straight up with me. He said, for a year,
Yeah.
yeah. And then the other was at
Mm.
my high school. I don't know if this is true of most high schools, but at my high school at the time, when you became a senior, you could go off campus for lunch. So coaches that were recruiting me would come for a on-campus visit or something, and they'd take me to lunch. And so Coach K did that, and we went to a place that I like to go, a little, cheap Mexican place. And when the check came, he made me pay my share, and no other coach did that. Every other coach paid, and his thing was, well, like, I can't pay for this, it's against NCAA rules, and it was like $5. But every other coach picked up the tab except for him. And I was thinking, he's a straight up dude. He's not gonna lie to me.
I enjoyed, Jay, watching your speech to the 2024-25 Duke basketball team. Really enjoyed it. It's a great speech, even if absent of Duke basketball, just life lessons, leadership. One of the things that struck me was you said, I'll know your priorities by your decisions. And I thought that was phenomenal. I'm curious if that's something that you got from Coach K in real time as a student, or is that something that, is born out of your experiences outside of Duke?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't get the quote from Coach K. That came from Jeff Van Gundy, and I think it ultimately was Pat Riley. That's where it started. Was your decisions reveal your priorities. Like, you can say, your priority is this, but if you decide to do something contrary to that, your decision revealed that wasn't your priority. But that I did, that ethic I got from Coach K, that ethos. I mean, we never had a curfew when we were in college. And his thing was, look, I can tell you what time to be in, but if you're not in at a time where you can get your rest, you really don't care about this. It's not your priority. And if you were to abuse, this kind of thing, then we'd put you on restriction. But there's no need to do that. You guys are going to make the right decisions and all that, and encourage each other to make the right decisions. And he was really good about stuff like that. Like, when we didn't have it very often, but we had a couple of players miss a team bus on the way to a tournament game, an ACC tournament game,
Mm.
and instead of just getting on the two guys that missed the bus, he got on the rest of us and said, "Why weren't you checking on one another? You guys know when you're coming down for the bus, if doors are closed or all that. If you don't see people, why are you not checking on each other?" And you started thinking about, hey, it's more than just me getting to the bus on time. You got to help your teammates get to the bus on time, stuff like that. So he was really good with that stuff.
Wow. You were part of a great class. I mean, the run that Duke's been on since as your class got it going, basically. I mean, they had the great run in the 60s. And then G-Man, Jaminsky, and Banks and those guys had a run. Jimmy Spinarkle.
Mhm.
But the run that you guys started, man, was it Mark Allery, Johnny Dawkins? I'm leaving out. Who am I leaving out?
Tommy Amaker, David
Tommy
Henderson,
Emiker, right?
Billy King, and then right after that, you had Quinn Snyder and Danny Ferry. We had a good group of guys and good players, obviously, but we just kind of did what Coach K told us, and things worked out.
Yeah, '86 championship game, Louisville. Still, every athlete I talk to, pro college, and you played at the highest level in college. And Ken Griffey Jr. There's stuff that they remember to this day. I'm like, "Argh!" Yeah. Do you still gnash your teeth over the '86 championship game? You were right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been close to 40 years, so another 40 years, I think I'll be over it. Um, but I don't know what it is. You get right to the edge, and you're right there to get what you've always worked for and always dreamed of, and you fall short of it. We'd lost in the NCAA tournament in the second round the year before,
Right.
but that didn't sting as much. Maybe because you weren't as close to it, or maybe we didn't think we were as good. But that one stuck with us, and the hardest part, honestly, was afterwards. Back then, you had to stay out there and watch the other team celebrate. You couldn't go back in the locker room. So we were sitting on our bench, kind of watching the whole thing, and it was crushing, because you lose by a bucket, and every game that we had that year, just about, we had won in those situations, and we didn't win that. We won 37 games, and then we wind up losing that one. It
Mm,
sucked. It really sucked.
mm. Man, oh man, that's a great game too. Hell of a game.
Sims family, huge Eagles fan, so we're all riding high right now. Jalen Hurts, I saw he said he was gonna jokingly he said he's gonna find his teammates for putting that picture out of him walking off with the confetti of the wrong team falling, and it'll sting forever. But you didn't have iPhones back in that day. But how did you take that and then turn it into something positive, was that even possible?
Oh, it's possible. I mean, I let it go. It wasn't like it was a crippling thing. But it was, I do think about it every year when I'm at the Final Four and a team wins. I always look at the other team as they're leaving, because I remember that feeling. And it was funny, like Coach K brought his old coach, Bob Knight, in to speak to us the night before the title game. I'll never forget the last thing he said. He said, don't, he said, nobody remembers who finishes second. And he was right, because before the title game, we were being discussed in the media as where did we fit in among the greatest teams of all time, because we'd won more games in that year than any team had ever won in a single season in
Right.
college basketball history. Since then, like Kentucky's won 38 and all that stuff, and that would have been our record, 38-2, if we would have won that final game. But as soon as the buzzer went off and Louisville had beaten us, that all went away. There was no talk about that anymore. And
Wow.
no, there's not a long list of the best teams never to win it.
Yeah.
And that's not a fun list to be on.
Yeah.
But it didn't diminish. Like the one thing that stood out is it didn't diminish the experience. Like the guys I played with, we're all really still very close friends and very tight knit group. So like I'm not a big fan of the word journey, but the ride we went on together, it wasn't diminished by that
Yeah.
last result. Although I would have been intolerable if we had won. I would have been, that's what champions do. I've been walking around, acting like a big shot all the time. So it was probably in the best interest of society that we lost that game.
And your wife would have calmed you down. Your wife would have taken care of you. Yeah. All right. The fact that you're laughing, I know I'm right,
You
correct?
are right.
Who's the instigator in that group chat with all the guys you were on that, your teammates from that era?
We don't have a group chat. I think I wind up seeing all the guys that I played with as much as anyone because of my job. So a lot of them, it's amazing, Jared, how many of us have stayed in basketball in one way or another. And I actually mentioned that to Tommy Amaker one time that, geez, so many of us, if not all, we've stayed in basketball. And I joked that clearly we didn't really want to work for a living. And he said, no, that's not it. And he said our experience was so good, we wanted to duplicate it. And I thought about it, and I think he's right there. That sports is really fun, it's hard too. There are hard things about it, and I'm not including myself among the coaches. Those guys are coaching or in NBA front office stuff like that. I went into broadcasting. Dave, we never lose, man. It's a great gig.
Amen, brother.
We're undefeated after all these years.
Might
But
be
but
scored upon, but we don't lose.
exactly. But being around it, so much and studying it,
Yeah.
it's been a nice career to have, and I get to see them all the time.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. If it's been a year since I talked to one of my teammates, which is pretty rare though. But doesn't matter how much time goes by. When we get back together, it's like we're right back in the locker room. Somebody saying, "Hey, put a little weight on, man. You better," stuff like that. I mean, they go right to the throat.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, so you go back to Duke, you get your law degree, and also coach. Was that concurrent? You were like you were in grad school and still doing an assistant for Coach K, or what was the chronology on that?
That was all Coach K's idea. So I was playing pro ball in Italy after my third year playing overseas. I had applied to law school at Duke, thinking that if one, I thought I wouldn't get in. But I thought if I get in, I can defer it, and then when I'm done playing, I could just go straight into law school without having to go through that process and take an extra year and all that. And that was my dad's idea. He said, if you wait till you're 30 years old to apply to law school, you're not going to go. And he was probably right there. So I took the LSAT and I over in Europe at a Air Force base, and I applied to Duke. And I think this is what happened when Coach K found out I applied. He called me and said, "Look, I've got a spot open." He goes, "If you get accepted, will you take it?" And I was like, "Well, not right now. I'd probably defer it because I want to keep playing." And he said, "Well, I've got a spot open on my staff, and I'd like you to take that, and you can go to law school and be an assistant coach at the same time." And I was like, "Geez, I don't know." I was like, "I don't know if I can handle law school. You think I can handle that too?" And he goes, "Well, if it doesn't work out, you can just quit." And honestly, I don't know if he meant I could quit law school or I could quit working for him. But I did it. I wanted to keep playing, but I thought, this is a good opportunity, and I thought, I would like to get into coaching someday. So I was thinking more on the coaching front than the law school front. But I did both, and it was only really hard the first year, because I was afraid that I wasn't going to do a good job in class, because I had no idea what law school was like. You don't have like midterms in law school. It's just like one test at the end, and you either do well or you don't. And I was thinking, if I don't, I'm out of here. Like, oh, they'll kick me out. But I did fine, and that was a really good decision, I think, to take that opportunity. But Coach K was the one that greased the skids for that. I'm not sure, honestly, if he didn't get involved, like with that job offer and all that, I probably wouldn't have gotten in. So I was really grateful for that he was so forward thinking and something that I wanted to do and help me get it accomplished.
Wow. Well, that's a hell of a story.
Coach K's helped both you guys. Dad, you Coach K played a role in Mariners, right? No?
Yeah, Jay, when Mariner Gate came up in Halloween '06, and he might have been after I called Abby, I might have called Coach K. I said, "Hey man, got an opportunity." He says, "Who do I call?" To this day, the former president of the now former president, I still remember that time Coach K called. I knew we had to get you in here. I said, "Well, that's why he's the man. What can I tell you?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's great with that stuff, and
Oh, it's unbelievable.
when I mean, he helped me in broadcasting, not later, but when I was in high school. When I was in high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do after basketball. I was thinking just about being a basketball player. And when I started getting attention as a player, there's an article written about you in the paper or something, and the reporter says, "Hey, what do you want to do after basketball?" And I didn't have a good answer. And so I said, broadcasting, because Frank Gifford had gotten into broadcasting, and Don Drysdale, and former athletes were doing that, and that was a novel thing at the time. Now, it seems like every former jock that gets behind the mic, but back then it didn't happen much. And so coaches read it, and they started recruiting me with, saying, "Hey, we can help you with this. We got a broadcast school, the Newhouse School at Syracuse, and all that." And Coach K introduced me to Chuck Howard at ABC Sports, and
Wow.
Chuck gave me a job as a runner. So I started doing production assistant work when I was in college. I did the PGA Championship at Riviera in '83. I did the '84 Olympics. I did Monday Night Baseball. I did bowling with Chris Schenkel and Nelson Burton
Mm.
Jr. I did all kind of ridiculous things, and kind of got my foot in the door, and to find out what broadcasting is all about. But that was just Coach K saying, "All right, if you say you want to do this, here's an avenue. Here's how I can help."
Wow. 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 Wow.
Your broadcasting career then started well before 95 with ESPN.
The first broadcast gig I ever got was, when I graduated law school and got married. My wife was not particularly interested in being a coach's wife. So I kind of gave up on the coaching thing because it wasn't the best thing for our family. So I took a job, and we moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. I took a job with a big law firm, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be a lawyer the rest of my life, and started practicing law. And midway through it wasn't even midway through my first year as an associate at a big law firm, I got a phone call from a guy named George Habel, who was president of the Capital Sports Network, a radio network. And he took me to lunch and said, "I'd like you to do color commentary on radio games. And I was like, well, I don't know if I can do that. I asked my bosses at my law firm. They said, well, if it doesn't hurt your work, I don't see why that's a problem. So I did Duke basketball games on the radio with Bob Harris for a couple years, and I think I made like $200 a game plus expenses. But it was a great education on being a broadcaster, because radio, as you guys know better than I do, is a lot different than television. The play-by-play person is the artist and has to paint the picture, and then as the color guy, I had to fill whatever gap was there. And so I felt like my time to talk was after the ball went through the basket and before it crossed half court. I could make a point. And it really caused me to be more succinct with my words to get my point across and get out, so I didn't get in Bob's way of painting the picture for everybody. They could, they obviously can't see it. Maybe the ones who turned the sound down on the TV did, but it was a great education. I did that for a couple years, and then it led to ESPN because I was told somebody heard me on the radio and offered me a game and to see how I did. And I must have done okay because I kept the gig.
That works. Hey, I want to switch over to college game day. That has become such a great institution, both for football and for college football and college basketball. First of all, it looks like you guys are having a blast every week, especially when you're on location. I mean, how much fun is that?
It's really cool because we get to go to all these great venues and
Yeah.
show, like, I think college sports is a little bit different, and the venues are all unique. You go into, and baseball too, like, Fenway's unique and all that. But you go into a pro football stadium or a pro basketball arena, there's a sameness to it, which isn't a bad thing. But the venues in college basketball are all really different and unique, and so we get to show that. And the places we go, they're all really proud of their places and their cultures and their fans, and they get to show it off, and that's really fun. And then you're with the people you enjoy working with the most. I've done that show now for 20. This is 21st year I've done it with, and every one has been with Reese Davis. We've been there from day one, and there's no person I know or colleague I've ever had that I value more than Reese Davis. He's the best of the best. There's never been a teammate like him in anything I've ever experienced.
How do you compare what you guys do, what Reese does with you guys, as compared to what he does with the football guys, with McAfee and Herb Street, Dez, and Coach Corso?
Football is a bigger operation because, one, it's a longer show, and football is such a different game. Like, football is an all-day experience for fans.
Mm.
Like, we ask a lot of the fans that come to college game day basketball because the game may be at 7 o'clock, and they come to a show that starts at 10 in the morning, goes to noon, and they're there, rowdy and having a good time and all that. But then they, at the end of it, because the team's got to come in and do their shoot arounds for the game, they got to get out of there right away. They usher them out. So it's a different vibe. I think it'd be a lot easier if they were, if we had the football model and they were just tailgating all day, liquored up and having a good time. But so it's a little bit of a different model, but that's certainly what we tried to copy, because they're the football shows, the gold standard.
Yeah. Well, you guys, and you and Seth, and Seth Greenberg, and Jay Williams, you guys do a great job. And I like you're not going to agree. It's a good discussion. You're going to have some disagreements, some agreements, and guys making some points. It's a fun watch, and especially if, like, coming out of baseball season for me, you guys bring me up to speed every week, man. So it means a lot. It's good stuff.
Well, you're nice to say that. I mean, we try to be a conversational show, which isn't easy to do, as you know. Television sometimes puts you in a position where everybody makes a 30-second speech, one after the other, and so we try to get out of that as much as we can. But still, you got an agenda of, like, a rundown of things you're supposed to get into the show. So sometimes that becomes problematic. But
Yeah.
the best part of the people, just in anything you do, I really enjoy the people I work with. I'm very, very fortunate.
Jumping into the NBA during the draft, how about that transition? You followed the college scene a lot, but you also got to figure out how said draftee could fit in with Team NBA. So you have to do a lot of NBA, dive into that stuff. There's a couple of weeks leading into the draft.
Yeah, and this year,
NBA
Dave's
draft.
been this year's been different for me because I'm doing NBA games in addition to college games. ESPN asked me to do the NBA this year, and I jumped at the opportunity. I thought it would be a ton of fun, and I'd learn even more about basketball, and I think I have. So I've already done I don't even know how many NBA games this year, and that'll continue into the playoffs. So it'll be a longer year for me this year. But on the draft side, I think this will be my 22nd or 23rd draft, something like that, maybe 22nd. My first draft for ESPN sitting at the desk was the LeBron draft in '03. And back then, I spent a lot of time scouting high school players. So I don't do that as much just because of the wear and tear. I'm getting older, man. I can't be out as much as I used to be, screwing my back up sitting in bleachers all summer. But
Roger that.
yeah, but I don't worry so much with the draft about fit. Does this player fit with this team? They needed a small forward, stuff like that. I let the others do that. I'm more on this is what the player does and looking at their long term success rate. So I go back and really kind of try to study. Okay, this guy made it. This guy didn't make it. Why? And what are the variables here? And I know everybody tries to do that, and there's a lot of hitting and missing, and hopefully you hit more than you miss.
You think, given all of the experience you've had looking at high school players and then the unforgettable moments you've witnessed at the highest levels, how would you do as a scout?
I think I do fine. I think I have a pretty good feel for it, and I'm willing to work, which I think is the most important thing in scouting. It's just information gathering and culling through it and finding out what's most important. But nobody in my experience has a magic eye. To be able to look at a player and say, okay, this player's going to make it. There are certain no brainers, like with LeBron James. As long as he stays healthy, he's Hall of Famer. But I think the best talent evaluators are the ones that work the hardest. They're the ones that are there all the time and gather the most information. The only thing though, Jared, that I would worry about a little bit is I think sometimes in anything you have to be really careful about groupthink. So somebody says something and you adopt that. Yeah, I think you have to be careful of that and make sure you have your own opinions and judgments on things. You can certainly be influenced by something, but I rarely anymore. I've been burned by that, 20 years ago, of taking somebody's word for something, and
Ooh.
I don't do that anymore. I if I hear something, I confirm it for myself, or sort of go the other way on it.
In terms of the experiences you've had seeing great moments at the highest level, what are some of the ones that stick out to you that feel ever present, collegiate level or at the pro level, covering games as you've had?
Boy, like I think the first time I saw LeBron James in high school, I think it was a high school sophomore. I think I was in New Jersey at the ABCD camp, and I was like, this is different than anything I've ever seen before. And as years pass, sometimes I think for older people like me, you tend to think that back in the day things were so great, and it was great, but the players now are so much better than they've ever
Oh,
been. And it doesn't mean that Michael Jordan wouldn't be the best player now, but generally the players now are way better than they've ever been. And so when I hear people say, "Oh, this guy wouldn't have translated," like they say Steph Curry back in the '90s when the game was so physical, he wouldn't have made it. You're like, come on, man.
He can cut on a dime and get off his shot just because of a hand check. You don't People think he wouldn't be able to get off a shot. I always think that that's crazy when I hear that.
To your point, Jared, like I remember laughing with Steve Kerr about this. He was like, "Okay, Steph Curry couldn't have played back in the '90s, but I could." He's like, "I did."
that's a great line. I've never met Steve Kerr, but I have liked him from afar for a long time. He's like he's a top shelf dude, right?
The best guy you've ever met. And like he's obviously incredibly competitive, ultra confident, but he has this disarming humility about him, and he's a very thoughtful person. He's really really smart. And when I say thoughtful, I don't, he's thoughtful of others. It sounds like he's sending thank you notes to everybody he meets, but he's introspective, and he understands how the world works. You're just not going to find a better human being. And there's a reason why he's been as successful as he's been. He's not been lucky to be on this team or this team wins or all that. It's because of him too.
Yeah, no question. I want to get back to college for a second, and I think you and I probably talked about this a long time ago, but it's at the fore right now. NIL, and you've always been an advocate for player rights and compensation. Your view on NIL, what it is, and where it's going.
Dave, I think we're in a transition period with athletes being compensated. So name, image, and likeness is in a lot of ways just a stopgap to where the players are going to be actually compensated by the schools the same way they would compensate a coach or an employee, another type of employee at the university. But the schools don't want to do that right now. The employment is now the new amateurism. It's like the third rail. They can't be employees when they've got thousands upon thousands of student employees at schools now. So I think we're going to get there at some point where, whether it's through collective bargaining or some other means, that the players are just going to sign contracts with their schools like the coaches do. They'll have buyouts in them. They'll have certain contract conditions. If Duke wanted to sign me now, I don't know why they would, but if they wanted to sign me now, they could say, "All right, we'll sign you to a 3-year deal. Here's the buyout that you would have to pay if you decide to leave. Mandatory class attendance, mandatory this, mandatory that. You got to get drug tested every so often, all that stuff. And if your GPA drops below a certain level, we can terminate the contract. They can do all that stuff if they want to. But they so far they haven't wanted to, because they're waiting for Congress to come in and give them a law that allows them to limit players. But I'm really happy that the players are getting this opportunity, because for so many of them, it's a life changing amount of money.
Oh yeah.
And you know, Jared may be different in this, but Dave, for you and me, when we left college, I had no idea how to deal with money. I'd never had it. And then all of a sudden, I signed a pro contract overseas, and I got money to deal with. I got to pay taxes, do all these things. I had no clue how to handle it. And luckily, I had people, my parents and others, that helped me with it. But now these young people are becoming financially literate at a high level earlier in their lives, so that when they do
Thank
get
God.
out, when they do get out and get into the quote unquote real world, they've got a leg up, and they've also got the opportunity for that money, if they're smart with it, to compound and look at that head start they have in life. And one last thing on this, I just want to tell you this little story that made a big impact on me. A couple years ago, I was in Detroit to do an event for Greg Campy, the head coach at Oakland, and it was me, Tom Izzo, and Blake Corum, the running back for Michigan.
Hmm.
So at the end of the presentation, I can't remember how many people were at the Detroit Athletic Club, a few hundred, but it was Q&A, and somebody asked Corum, "Why did you come back for your last year at Michigan?" And Blake Corum is a very thoughtful person. And he said, I essentially said, "I know what I'm supposed to say. I'm supposed to tell you that I'm coming back to win a national championship, to get my degree, and to win the Heisman Trophy." And he said, "All those things are true. I want to do all those things." But he said, "But I've also had a strong interest in real estate.
Mm.
And with my NIL money, I put together a small real estate portfolio, and I wanted another year to build that portfolio before I went into the NFL." And I'm thinking, this is what's happening. It's not happening with everyone. The I think the false narrative for people that are against the NIL thing, or were against it, is they're just going to blow the money. What are they going to do with it? They're just going to blow it, and they're not. They're not doing that. Most of them are being really smart with the money, and it's giving them a really good, not only head start, but they can build generational wealth based upon their contributions to college athletics, which are considerable.
I love that because you've seen the statistics or heard them about so many pro athletes are bankrupt after a couple 3 years. So this young man is like way ahead of the curve here, way ahead.
That's a great point, Dave. Like how much of the financial difficulties that people talk about with pro athletes are at least partially a result of not having access to money while they were in college and not gaining that sort of education.
Hmm.
Oftentimes that they're vulnerable young athletes. So I think it's overwhelmingly positive. Can there be a negative story where somebody gets taken advantage of by an agent? Of course, there can be that. But I would tell coaches sometimes when they would complain about that, like they're just going to blow the money. They don't know what to do with it. They're going to get taken advantage of here. I said, look, if the players couldn't drive, and then all of a sudden the NCAA said they could drive, you'd be saying, what's going to happen now? They're going to have to keep their cars registered. They're going to have to keep them maintained. They can get in an accident. They can get a DUI. Like all those things are true. Most young people have their driver's license, so they do just fine.
Yeah,
And I feel the
yeah.
same way about NIL.
Interesting you say that because that's having doing my couple handfuls of games this year, talking to coaches. Man, I'm tired of having this guy say, "Hey, what are you going to pay me?" That whole thing. So I hear a lot of that grousing, but you're saying that you have an optimistic look that at this that it won't get screwed up. I mean, because certainly it seems like Mike got out, Jimmy got, Boeheim got out, Tony Bennett got out at Virginia, so they didn't have to. Roy Williams. I mean, it's a list of acclaimed guys who've won national titles or Hall of Famers. They said, "I'm out of here, Jay Wright. I'm out of here. I don't want to have to deal with this stuff."
Yeah, but Coach K and Roy Williams and Jim Boeheim, they were in their 70s.
Agreed.
They were gonna get out soon anyway. And I don't know that necessarily. Like I think if all those guys were in their 40s, they would have figured it out and
Okay.
they would have attacked it and dealt with it. Tony Bennett quitting and Jim Larinaga. I mean, Jim Larinaga in his mid 70s too,
Right.
but
Hmm.
there was a portion of that, and I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody, but they weren't winning either, and
True.
so that
Inescapable.
that had something to do with that. But like to me, this whole thing, like if coaches complained years ago about one and done in the NBA, they would say, God, the parents aren't asking me anymore about education. Now they're asking how soon I can get their kid to the NBA. All right. Well, no, they're not complaining about that anymore. Now they're going, all they want to know is how much their money they're going to make. As if when they're looking at a job, they never talk about money. They're looking at another school they may go to, an NBA opportunity. They're going, hey, boy, the really nice campus, and what a nice surrounding area. I'll take the job. And by the way, how much? They're not doing that. They want to know how much they're going to get paid too, and it's just one factor. Of course, it's early, but if they want the guys to not ask about money until the very end, and then they know they don't have enough, and waste all their time, why not find out early what the player wants? And you guys may
Good
laugh
point.
at this. I had a big time university trustee at a Power Five school called me about a separate issue. And he says you wouldn't believe what some kid asked us for recently, mid major transfer. He asked us for $750,000. Can you believe that? And he was insulted by it. And I said, well, like if I drove my car up to your driveway and asked you to pay me $750,000, what would you tell me? He said, I'd tell you get lost. And I said, right, tell the kid to get lost, like, or offer him what you think he's worth. Just because he asked for something doesn't make him a bad guy or the system's totally out of whack.
Makes him a good advocate for himself.
Yeah, like the system's not out of whack just because somebody asked for something. Say no and move on to
Right.
somebody else, or make him an offer. If he's really got that offer somewhere else, he's going to take it anyway. So why don't you just offer him what you think he's worth? Maybe he'll take it. I don't know why everybody gets their hair on fire over this. It's just business, just like anything else.
Yeah.
Just business, that's just not been a part of coaches' lexicon or negotiating in that way, right? Is that sort of the key to getting caught up to this new space in addition to waiting on legislation from Congress is kind of coaches coming not just coming to grips with, but being able to approach it in a new way with a language and a business-minded approach that they maybe is not a club in their bag yet? Is there some truth to that?
Yeah, I think a couple things on that. Like part of the complaining is just coaches generally tend to do that, in my experience. Not everybody, but they tend to complain. Back in the day when I was coming out of high school, it was the AAU coach has too much influence. I used to just deal with the high school coach. Now I got to deal with the AAU coach, and now the AAU coach is sitting in our home visits, and then the uncle. We got to deal with all these relatives. Used to be just us and the parents, and they complained about that. Then they complained about the NBA, sort of the one and done thing. So things are always going to change. It's never going to stay the same. So you have some that complain about it and just kind of grouse, and then others that adjust. I think even Coach K at the beginning of the one and done thing, he didn't care for it. But after a while, he was like, "Hey, we're playing against these guys, and some of them want to come here. Like, why not take them and take the ones that are serious and what they want to be here, and they're going to do what they're supposed to do while they're here, and they establish a long term relationship with a great school. It's a positive. But like the coaches that are younger, generally, not all of them, but the younger guys are generally adjusting to it a little bit better because they see this is where it's headed and there's no stopping it. Some of the older guys sound like they're complaining about the cell phone. Like I liked it better with the rotary phone. I don't want to be somebody get a hold of me all day long and this damn phone. I'm looking at it all the time. It's always going off. Cell phones ain't going away. You better adjust to it. And similar to players getting paid, like none of them had a problem. I sound like I'm complaining about coaches now, but none of them had a problem when their salaries shot way up.
Oh,
And none of
exponentially. Come on.
Yeah, and none of them had a problem when we started traveling all over the place for these games. These guys are pros. They're pros, the players.
Yeah. And to that point, with let's see, Woj goes to Bonaventure to basically be the GM.
Mhm.
All right, Belichick goes to North Carolina for football. And do you expect a similar movement? Maybe NBA coaches or ex NBA coaches coming back to college?
I mean, I think it's possible. I think it's possible because I think it's a landscape that they are very familiar with, of dealing with, making decisions that are more than just does this player fit into what we do.
Right,
There's a financial component to it, and now you don't just scout high school. You're going to have to scout the entire college landscape because most of your recruits now are going to be transfers.
right.
They're
Oh,
older.
for sure.
Yeah. So, and the whole transfer market has affected high school players. Now a really good, the great high school players go wherever they want, but kind of the second tier, really, really good ones that would go to North Carolina or Duke or Michigan State or whatever, and they might have to sit a year behind someone and work their way up. They're going mid major now, and then they prove themselves, and then they get the call up.
And then
Um,
you get the guys 25 years old playing. I mean, I've had a couple of games. It's like dude's on his fourth school
yeah,
after sitting out a year, the COVID year, and the guy's like 24, 25.
Yeah,
Amazing.
and that troubles some people. The transfer thing, they're like going, "Hey, there's no loyalty, there's no commitment." Back in the day, we had loyalty, and I was going, "Did we really have loyalty when you couldn't do it? You didn't know whether we wanted to leave or not because we couldn't leave." But so I'm not sure about the loyalty thing, but it's really hard to tell a player who's not an employee and not paid by the university and that's told by the NCAA you're a student to be treated like any other student, that they can't leave and go somewhere else when every other non-athlete student gets to transfer whenever they want and participate in whatever activities they want at their new school. They're stuck on that one. Once they start, if they sign them to a contract, then they've got the ability to keep them. But until then, this is the way it's going to be, and it's the system. Like it's not the system that somebody thrust on the NCAA. It's a system they set up. These are all their rules. Like the
Yeah.
transfer portal didn't appear out of some old Star Trek segment. They created it.
And you've seen a whole bunch of good NBA prospects. Talk to me about Cooper Flagg. I've only seen him a couple, three times. I know you've seen him in person a bunch. I love what I've seen. My goodness, that kid can play.
Real deal. Yeah, he's the real deal. He's not only got all of the attributes of a basketball player that you want, He can handle it. He can pass it. He's a good shooter. He's becoming a better shooter. That's the area of growth that I think you'll see from him in the future. But ultra competitive, and that's the thing that's on a different level of players I've seen coming out. That you're not going to play at that level if you're not a competitor. But there are different levels of that, and he's at the highest level. And honestly, at Duke, the last guy I remember, I think he's the most polished, prepared, competitive freshman Duke's had since I've been associated with the program. And there have been other guys that you may argue that okay, Grant Hill was more talented. Like I think Grant Hill's the best player to ever play at Duke.
Wow.
All in, like he's the best player to ever come out of there. Leitner would probably be second, but Grant was not what this kid is when he was a freshman. It's not close. This kid's way ahead of where Grant was.
Well, didn't I text you? Was it you that had the remark that Grant Hill was 7 years, I guess, in the
Yeah,
NBA?
you did.
It was like was Sandy Koufax, and I went, boom. It's the same thing. He got the injuries, but that 7 years.
Yeah, you did text me, and thank you for that. So Grant, to that point, when Grant came out of Duke in 1994, that was the same year Glenn Robinson came out of Purdue and all that. Grant was like the second coming of Michael Jordan to NBA personnel. And his first 7 years in the league, I think there were only 5 or 6 players that could match what he did those first 6 or 7 years, whatever the number was, with points, rebounds, assists, and steals. Those guys like Oscar Robertson, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, and then LeBron did it. But you're talking about the highest level, the separate wing of the Hall of Fame.
Right,
And
exactly.
had Grant not been injured, he would have been up there with the greatest of all time. The greatest of all time, and his numbers suggested it wasn't going anywhere absent that injury that frankly almost killed him. And still, he got 20 years in the league. I mean, he's an
Unbelievable, right?
extraordinary athlete, extraordinary human being, just
Yeah.
incredible.
And for those youngsters out there, Sandy Koufax, when I was a kid, had a dominant run of 6 or 7 years, and then this was way before Tommy John surgery. Had it been Tommy John surgery, he might have gone another 5 or 6, but he had a 6 or 7 year run. What might be it's considered among the best, maybe 2 or 3 runs by pitcher in the history of the game. So that's when you put Grant Hill in that same category, that's speaking volumes. That's good
Yeah,
stuff.
and Sandy Koufax, this, went to University of Cincinnati on a basketball scholarship.
Lefty. I heard he was good too. And I always say this: all my heroes from the '60s, I've met just about everybody. I still want, and the Yankees play at the Dodgers in late May. I have to meet him. I just, he can pump a basketball. He's 89 years old. He still looks like a prince.
I met him once at a charity golf tournament, and we were on the range, and I was just kind of picking up golf back then. So in my spot on the range, on one side of me was Sandy Koufax, and on the other side was Sam Snead.
Goodness gracious!
Wow.
Like two of the sweetest swings you could ever see, and I'm there, rocketing balls off the hosel right next to him.
Shake hippopotamus, right? Hey, in terms of NBA readiness, we were just talking about Flagg. Look, you saw LeBron early on, and Wemby. How would you rank those 3 in terms of their NBA readiness? Comparable times.
Yeah, I'd probably, Wembanyama had played so much pro basketball before he went into the draft. You knew that he was prepared. There's always something in the back of my mind with somebody that's built like he is about durability. But George Gervin was a stick figure and played a million years in the league.
Iceman.
Nobody could push him. Nobody pushed him around. He didn't break. And I figured Wembanyama would do just fine. LeBron, you knew, like that was a different cat. I said we did this high school game in 2002, and I was like the sideline reporter. I was the only one on the crew that had seen him, and so they asked me what I thought, and I said he's the best high school player I've ever seen. And better. He's just as skilled as Kobe Bryant or Kevin Garnett, but he's more physically imposing at this age. Like he's the best I've ever seen. And then I got a lot of pushback from people going, "Yeah, what about Oscar Robertson or what about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar?" And I'm like, "How old do you think I am? I didn't see them. I said best I've ever seen. I didn't see them." But yeah, he was a different cat. But I would say that Flag, he just turned 18 about a month ago, and he is comparable in his ability to step in the league and play right now. Like
He
he'll play
just
right
turned
away.
18.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I mean,
Oh my.
I don't know. It's hard for me to remember like how clueless I was at 18, but to think that you could at that age do what this kid's doing and what so many of them are doing, like they're so far advanced to what we were at the time. And again, it's not to say that Len Bias wouldn't have been the best player or Michael Jordan, you name it, at
Yeah.
age 17 or but Michael Jordan at age 18 wasn't what he became either.
Right.
um, these guys are just way ahead. They play more. They're better coached. Their nutrition is better. Everything they're doing is next level, and I think you're seeing it
Mm.
in the product on the floor.
Is there anybody that comes to mind for you that for whatever reason, circumstances were what they were, they didn't make it, but you're like amazed at what could have been, whether a contemporary of yours or not?
Yeah, there were a lot of guys, and I actually watched Lenny Cook and LeBron play against each other in at that ABC Sonny Vaqueros thing in Teaneck, New Jersey. Yeah, Shea Cotton was one of those guys. That was tremendous in high school, California kid. Harold Miner, I thought was
Oh,
gonna kind of hit big.
baby
There have been
Jordan, left-hander.
yeah, Baby Jordan. There have been so many of those guys, and I wind up, going back to some of the ones from California because I grew up in Los Angeles. But it's kind of like golf. I play a ton of golf now, and some of the pros, you'll ask them like, who are the guys you played against that you're shocked didn't make it? And they'll have this long list of guys that they couldn't beat when they were in college, couldn't beat as a junior. And for one reason or another, it didn't hit on the PGA Tour. And that happens in basketball, baseball, all kinds of things. I mean, how many great was it Brian Taylor, the pitcher in
Oh my
baseball?
God. Yes, Brian Taylor got in a bar fight. Guy yanked his left arm out. Good night, everybody.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many guys that for one reason or another didn't make it, and
Yeah.
in a way, it's heartbreaking, but it's also kind of sobering that. And you talk to players about this all the time. Like, there's nothing wrong with having other interests. Like, you better be a well-rounded person because even if you play for a million years and have more money than you can count, you're going to want to do something interesting with the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, barring the catastrophic with Cooper Flagg to reach the potential we all see, he has the ability to reach. What do you think he needs to do, to get there and live into these what are ultimately great expectations because of how great of a base he's starting from?
I think refining his shot is probably number one. Like he's got range, he can knock down threes, he's got great hands. So, but I think becoming a more consistent perimeter shooter would be number one on my list for him. I think he's going to continue to get stronger and all that stuff, and he's plenty strong now. I mean, he can really attack the basket. It's he's from Maine. I can't name all the luminaries from Maine that have played in the NBA. I'm sure there are some, but he's a different cat. They don't make him like him mentally very often. He's at a level that you just don't see.
He had one drive where he attacked the rim in a Carolina game I watched. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I mean, he saw an opening was there. Yeah, man. It's impressive. It really is. Hey, I want to just backtrack a little bit. Your uh, your law degree. What kind of law work is it that you are or were practicing?
I practiced in the area litigation, so like kind of trial law, and it was commercial litigation, so business cases. I did some securities work toward the end of my
Okay.
time as a full time lawyer. I'm still with my law firm, still have my license active and all that, so I could jump back into it. I don't want to, but I could jump back into it tomorrow if I had to. So my association with my law firm has been a real blessing for me to be around that many smart people every day, and then not having to bill hours anymore. I don't have to bill hours like I used to, so that's kind of
Yeah.
nice. But I enjoyed practicing law full time. It was a lot of work and it was really hard, especially trying to do broadcasting on the side. But until I stepped away and went full time with ESPN and kind of stepped away from the full time law practice, I didn't realize how much stress I was under until the stress was off. I was under a ton of stress, and I had when I accepted the deal with ESPN to go full time, and I was going to step away from my practice. I had told my firm I had a few cases that were headed toward trial or arbitration, whatever it may be, and they asked me if I'd see them through to the end, and I told them I would. And so I had a trial that was going on, and I was getting up in the morning, getting dressed, and my wife had the TV on. You know, it's 6:37 in the morning, and she's got on the Today Show or whatever it was. And I remember this like it was yesterday. Charlton Heston was on talking about the NRA, and he said something I thought was outrageous, and I started arguing back with the television set. And my wife walks in the bedroom and goes, "You need to quit. Like you need to move on to broadcasting as soon as this is over. Like you're arguing with the TV set." And I go, "Yeah, I think I'm a little tightly wound here. I need to change this."
You have a wise wife, and it sounds like your boss was pretty cool and pretty smart to let you, hey, he's got a good thing going. We can still be associated. Let him rock and roll.
My dad still argues with the TV. It's just tell me the time and score, like or radio when we'd be in the car and I was a kid. Jay, if you were in charge of NCAA reform, what, given your law background and being the big mind you are, what are the 3 changes you would implement immediately?
One, I would take away all restrictions on athletes. So if a university wants to pay their athletes, pay them. If you don't. The market will figure that out. We don't have, coaches, mostly coaches, but administrators too, use the word guardrails right now. That's their new word. They say we need guardrails,
Code for what?
restrictions, and they'll just say it's the wild wild west out there. And I try not to be snarky about it, but I'm like, you mean the wild wild west that the rest of us live in, where anybody can make you an offer at any time, and if you want to be bound by something, it's by a contract that's negotiated at arm's length. That wild wild west, uh, all they really want is the control over the athlete. So we want cost certainty. Like there are no controls, there are no guardrails or restrictions on what NCAA schools can spend in facilities, what they can spend on coaches, what they can spend on anything they want, except for athletes. That's where we're drawing the line. We can't let these people have any money because that would get out of control.
It's
And I
ironic
think
because these same folks, I would imagine, free market economics and deregulation in any sphere outside of the one they're operating in, they'd advocate for those things. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're exactly right. They would absolutely do that. But I think deep down, some of them know that if the athletes are allowed to bargain for fair market value, some of the administrators' jobs are going to go away,
Mm.
and they're certainly going to be paid less. Like you can't tell me that the strength coach at Alabama is worth $1 million and the quarterback is not. It's absurd to suggest that. So salaries were inflated for a long time because they didn't have to pay the expense or the value of the athletes. And look, there's going to have to be some things sorted out. There's no question that there are going to be hard decisions to be made by some of these schools. But the idea that this has been some benevolent gift bestowed upon the athlete, like how dare you not be on your knees, in gratitude because we gave you a scholarship. That's absurd because they give non-athlete students scholarships and they have no obligations at all. We had obligations. I had to show up on time to practice. I had to go to all the games. We had obligations, man. And it wasn't like I could say, "Hey, Coach K, I really don't feel like going to Clemson this weekend because I have something else going." I'm going, and you were an employee and you're a professional athlete. They just restricted your pay, but that's what I do is I take the restrictions off. The other thing would be basketball related. I would go to quarters. We're the only game in the world that doesn't have quarters. Men's college basketball. We still play two 20-minute halves. No other game in the world does it. Not high school, not FIBA, not the NBA, and we could reset team.
WNBA.
Yeah, we could reset team fouls at the end of the first and third quarters. It'd be a better, cleaner game. Fewer free throws on common fouls would be so much better.
I love both of those changes.
Yeah, I would do that in a heartbeat.
What do you see as being the role of institutions outside of the school, the institution that is the school you play for, whether it be like a Morgan Stanley in providing financial literacy, or other institutions that might help improve the base that kids all have? Boiling it down, what do you see the role of institutions being in sort of what the perfect NIL solution ends up looking like?
Well, institutions, I mean, I think you mentioned a financial institution. They're going to do what's in their best interests, business wise. So right now, a lot of the colleges are looking at the role of private equity in the future. Private equity is now in professional sports like crazy. And from the conversations I've had with different people, there's a lot of the private equity folks think that college sports is undervalued. So there are tremendous opportunities there. And if they're willing to put money in, I can guarantee you the schools are going to be willing to take it. So we're going to see a lot of changes there too. This is only going to grow, in my view. College sports is only going to grow. Um, what I think each school and each conference has to determine what is best for them. Now, you can have it on an individual level. Like maybe the Ivy League doesn't want to participate in this, and they're going to say, "Look, come here, play, but we're not gonna participate in this NIL stuff. We're not gonna pay you. If it's not enough for you to come to Harvard and play, or come to Yale and play, then go somewhere else." And then they're gonna have to live with the consequences of that, which means they're probably gonna lose a lot. But if they're cool with that, that's fine. The market is going to figure all this out, in my view.
Yep.
Doesn't mean it doesn't need to be smartly regulated by the NCAA in certain areas, but regulating a player's pay is not the right way to do it. To me, that's absurd. The schools can figure it out on their own. Like these schools know exactly whom to recruit and exactly whom to put in the game when they need to win. They know how much they're worth. They're not out like the president. I went to school at Duke. The president of Duke University is not up at night going, "My God, are we going to pay the basketball coach the same as the head of the landscape department? And what about the head of the food service department? How do we pay these people? There's so many people. They all work just as hard." They know how to value all that stuff. It's not that
Yep.
big of a deal. And they know how to value the athletes too.
I saw a great clip with Mark Lasry, former or Bucks owner, right? Talking about from a private equity perspective, you can listen to what he's saying and see that if the NCAA doesn't act, private equity will do it for them, is what it looks like.
Yeah, and they'll take the money. So if I don't know exactly how it would work, but say that Duke or Florida State or whatever, private equity says, "All right, we want to take a 49% ownership stake in your athletic department." So they're essentially buying an income stream and all the things that come with that. Uh, that could be very attractive for an influx of capital, infusion of capital.
Hmm.
That could be really attractive to a school. But one thing that private equity is going to say when they make that infusion of capital is, you need to trim down this bloated athletic department of yours.
That's like step number one of PE.
Right. You don't need 27 athletic directors, and you don't need all these people. You don't need 20 suits for the basketball team when only 12 players are in uniform. You don't need all these people. Like let's lean this up and do this the right way. This is not a government job. That's going to happen because these athletic departments, when years ago when I was in college, that was about the time they were starting to say, the schools are starting to say, all right, the athletic department needs to be self-sustaining. We don't want to give university funds to fund athletics anymore. So you guys got to pay for yourselves. They never anticipated the athletic department was going to make all this money. So now the university is siphoning off money from the athletic department and then saying the athletic department doesn't have any money left at the end of the year. It's amazing how expenses have magically risen to the level of these gigantic revenues. But in having those revenues, they've also paid everybody more and hired way more people than they would have otherwise because they had so much money, and that's on their bottom line now. And they're going to have to get more efficient as we go forward, and they will.
Wow, unbelievable. All right, you I want to do this. This means a lot to me because I know I've read your tweets where you are quoting pop culture, particularly hip hop. And I'm not nearly up on hip hop and whatnot like you and Jared are. When did you start dropping lyrics on the air and on Twitter and whatnot?
I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, but I am not a hip hop expert.
Well, you're ahead of me though. I know that.
Well, yeah, but I may be an enthusiast. So, Dave, you'll remember this. Like this it's Jared will know it, but it's before his time. So probably 1979. I'm in high school, and the first time I ever heard any sort of rap hip hop was the Sugar Hill Gang, Rapper's Delight.
Amen. One of the all-time greats.
My teammates and I listened to it every single day. We worked out to it. We sang it. I can remember all the lyrics to Rapper's Delight right now. And so I kind of started enjoying rap music and hip hop at that time, and at least having an appreciation for it. And then, my teammates got me into different stuff when I was in college. It's not all I listen to. I'm a huge Rolling Stones guy, and I like, I've gotten into country recently. I like Eric Church and Chris Stapleton, but I do. The tweet thing came from, we were at Michigan State doing game day, and we were on the air, and Michigan State's warming up. They're about to play a game, and Draymond Green walks past us wearing a pair of headphones, and we asked him, "What are you listening to?" And he said, "Young Jeezy." So Hubert Davis was on the desk with us at the time before he went to North Carolina as an assistant, now the head coach. And he turns to me and he says, "Is that on your playlist or your iPod back then?" And I said, "Actually, it is. I got TM 101 on there." And nobody believed me. So I started getting heat on Twitter. People going, "Come on, man, you don't listen to Snowman. Who are you trying to fool?" And I put a couple lyrics out. And the last one, I actually had to leave doing that exercise of trying to convince people, "No, I do listen to this," and I had to go into my office. So I got to go to work on it. And somehow it hit, and then I kept doing it every day. It was a really bizarre thing.
Love that. I love that. Let's play a little game. Finish that lyric.
Oh, I can't do that. You'll dominate me. No, this is just an embarrassment waiting to happen.
Well, let's go a different direction real quick. Then I would love to hear your thoughts here. Is if you can rank these artists: Tupac, Biggie, Eminem, Jay-Z, Lil Wayne.
I'd go Biggie 1.
Definitely agree.
Maybe the greatest wordsmith I've ever heard. Big Jay-Z fan. 2, Tupac, and then Eminem.
Okay, so Wayne bringing up the caboose there. So the trick question for me, Nas is my favorite rapper. Does Nas jump to the top of that list or no?
Not the top.
No.
I thought the documentary I saw on Biggie Smalls was the one that put me over the top on his incredible talent, lyrical talent.
Layered.
I was blown away by it. Like I enjoyed the music. I had no idea the depth of it. None. And honestly, Jarrett, at first, during the Super Bowl halftime show, it took me a while to figure out what Kendrick Lamar was doing.
I have to go back and check it. Yeah.
It took me a while to figure it out. And then I was like, man, this is one of the deepest things I can recall being done in a venue like that. Like that was profound. And at the end of it, I like at the first, it didn't make my toes tap at first. So at first I was like, what's going on here? And then I finally kind of figured out the Samuel L. Jackson thing I started getting, and I was going, this is amazing. It's amazing.
It was incredible. I'm still learning just by all of the reviews I'm watching. Things
Me
are still
too,
being
and
uncovered.
I don't claim to know anything about it, but the symbolism of the flag being split. I think as we go forward, that's going to be looked back upon in a different way than it is now. Like it's going to grow in appreciation. And I know this is not the same thing, but Dave, you'll remember this when in 1968, when John Carlos and Tommy Smith took the podium at the Olympics in Mexico City.
Yeah.
People didn't get it. and some people did, but the
Hmm.
most of America didn't get it, and they get it now looking back. And I think
Absolutely.
that'll. And I'm not trying to compare the two things. I mean,
That's reasonable,
the
though. It's reasonable.
yeah, just sort of the importance of what Carlos and Smith did then. It pales in comparison, maybe to some, but I think when we look back, you'll have a completely different appreciation of what Kendrick Lamar did. It was amazing.
Switching gears, NCAA tournament, SEC's having a spectacular year. Do you expect the national champion to come out of that group? I mean, they're dominating the top 10, the top 25. I mean, it's just unbelievable what's happening in that conference.
Yeah, I won't be surprised if it does. Whether it could be Auburn, could be Alabama, could be Tennessee. It's possible. But I think the difference between there's a difference between best team and best league. So there's no question the SEC is the best league, and I think it's the best league I've ever seen. And it doesn't mean that in the ACC in 1984 that North Carolina wasn't better than all these teams, or that Georgetown wasn't better, in 80, 85 or whatever.
Hmm.
There have been better teams than every team in the SEC, but there's never been a group of teams that have been this strong top to bottom, and especially when you consider there's 16 of them. The last time a league was this dominant was the ACC in the mid 80s, but
Right.
there were only 8 teams in that league. I think it's a lot easier to have 8 really good teams than have 16 really good teams. And but if Houston wins the title or Duke wins the title, I won't be surprised by that. But I would be really surprised if the Southeastern Conference doesn't have a number of 6 or 7 teams playing in the second weekend.
You got a team that's maybe not a headliner that might be able to come up, as they say in horse racing, coming up hard on the outside.
Yeah, there are a couple. I think Purdue's very good. They're not as good as they were last year, but Dave, I don't see a lot of teams outside of the top 8
Okay.
that I think can win the thing. I think there are 25 teams that can make the Final Four
Yeah.
because that's winning 4 games. The last 2 are really hard, and I think it's a different level of proficiency that's going to win that. You're not going to back into winning the whole thing. You can
Yeah.
back into a Final Four. It's still hard, but you can back into one. If a
Yeah.
couple big shots fall down in your path, you can have an easy road there. Nobody's going to back into a title.
It's early. We still got some time, but if you had to put your finger on somebody right now, who would it be to win it all?
Duke's the most talented team. They're young in spots, but their youth is more mature than most young teams.
Sure.
So I think they've got a great chance to win this thing. If Auburn can stay together, they're really powerful.
Okay.
But there's something about Alabama, and they're playing this weekend. Auburn and Alabama, first they're 1 versus 2. They've never played 1 versus 2 in football, and they're playing in basketball.
Go
Um,
figure.
they play a different style. They can really score. I mean, they're averaging 91 a game in Southeastern Conference play, and they hang 100 on teams in a heartbeat. They're going to be difficult to beat when they get to the end of the year.
All right. Best college team you've seen this season?
Auburn, right now, Auburn, Duke long term.
Sneaky bracket buster.
Michigan State, even though they're having a hard time shooting it.
Yeah, I saw that. Thoughts on the 2 Rutgers freshmen that are playing really well?
Ace Bailey
Oh,
and Dylan
and
Harper,
Harper.
they are legit. And it's surprising they haven't won more, but they don't have a ton around them. But they're legit, and they're going to be off the board in the top 5 picks.
Okay. Thoughts on Duke reloading with the boozers coming in?
Yeah, I mean they never called when my son was coming out. I don't know what the problem is. They must like Boozer better. No, they're very good players, especially
All
Cam.
right. Big picture on women's hoop the last 24 months. Caitlin Clark, Dawn Staley at South Carolina, the WNBA, and unrivaled.
It has been awesome. When
Yes.
I was a kid, my sister played Little League. She was one of the first girls in Southern California to play Little League baseball. Cheryl Miller was a huge deal in LA when I was in high school, and I've known Ann Myers forever. And to see what is being rewarded now, I always think
Mm.
of them. That
Yeah.
all they went through, and now it's paying off in a big way. It's really cool.
I, I always enjoy talking to Ann Myers Drysdale. Finish this sentence. I wouldn't be who I am without.
My wife, Wendy.
Copy that. Best arena to call a college game in.
Kansas. Allen Fieldhouse is the best venue. I know I'm going to take some heat from my Cameron Indoor Stadium brethren, but there's nowhere better.
All right. Favorite game you've covered?
That's a hard one. The one people remember is that 6 overtime game between UConn and Syracuse, which was the latest Raftery has ever been out without getting in trouble with his wife.
The Gov. I tell you what, I did a game with him earlier this year. He is just so awesome. It's unbelievable. It's
It's a
unbelievable.
what a treat to work with him, but to be around him. He's just
Yeah.
a wonderful guy.
Uncle, one more. Favorite movie other than I Come in Peace?
I'd probably go with The Godfather on that, although The Big
Yes.
Lebowski would be second.
That good choices. Best player you've ever seen in person?
Uh, well, Michael Jordan. I saw the bottom
Figured,
of
yeah.
his shoes a lot. He was a little hard to play against. The other was Ralph Sampson was amazing,
Okay. Okay.
but
A coach that,
That's played
yeah,
against. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar may have been the best player I've ever seen in person.
cannot. I'm telling you, when you start talking the greatest of all time, please. Try to tell people, please do not leave Kareem out.
Yeah, it's
I mean, come
ludicrous
on.
that he's not even mentioned when they're talking about like Jordan and LeBron.
I
They
mean, it's
changed the
right.
rules for the guy. They literally changed the rules for him.
They did for Wilt too, and both of them two of my all-time favorites. And Wilt was one of the great interviews I've ever had. I literally was starstruck because I grew up when I was like, "Yo, big, whatever." A coach you'd love to play for, not named Coach K.
I would have
Would
loved to have played for Tom Izzo. Of all the coaches that I have been around, there's not one I admire more than Tom. Not one. And he would have hated coaching me, but I would have loved to have played for him. I would have loved it.
He's one of my all-time favorites in any sport I've covered. One rule you'd change in college basketball tomorrow, if you could.
I'd reduce the physicality so we could see these guys unleashed. There's too much clutching and grabbing. I think I mentioned the going to quarters. I would do that, and then I would go to 24 seconds and
Yes,
let these guys really play because the NBA game is just a better product than we have, and it's largely because of the rules. I wouldn't get the defensive 3 seconds, but quarters would really help us, and 24-second clock would really help us.
best advice you've ever received.
Probably from Coach K. He used to have this thing. He would say, "Next play." Uh, Whatever happened on the floor, good or bad, he would say, "Next play." Like you got to move on. You can't make the next play if you're thinking about the last one. And it's something I've used in every other aspect of life. My kids hated it because when they'd fall down or something in their knee and start crying, I go, "Come on, next play, let's go. You're good." They're like, "Hey, no, I'm hurt. I'm actually hurt." To kind of get yourself out of your pity party or whatever it is and move on to the next thing. It's really helpful, really helpful.
Yeah.
But when Coach K was yelling at me, when he was yelling at me about something I screwed up, I always wanted to say, "What about next play? I've moved on."
I love that. That's so funny. Leadership for people in business or sports. What's one thing that you've used to great benefit that people should know about leadership?
One of my most trusted mentors is a gentleman named Ben Hawfield, who is the managing partner of my law firm for a long time and a long time that I was there. And I remember him saying one time, it was around time of compensation. And I always kind of thought that, boy, all the partners are going to be fighting over money. And he's like, "Nope, that's not the issue." He says, people need to know that they're valued and that their contribution is meaningful. And so even lawyers that made a ton of money, what they really wanted was acknowledgement that their contribution was valued by their colleagues and by the organization. And I've always remembered that it's important to let people know how much you value what they do, and that's important on any team. It's important in your family, and it's important in any organization. That people have to know how much you value their contribution because you got to catch people doing something right once in a while. Everybody's really good at telling people what they're doing wrong. Like catch them doing something right once in a while.
Great point.
Love that. I used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this.
You're going to kill me in all this stuff. I can't. I was horrible at poetry. No shot of doing
So
that.
I had to grind like that to shine like this is what everybody in Philly is going to be yelling at the top of their lungs on Friday at the parade from Meek Mill.
What I would tell the people in Philly is summer's mine, winter too, popping bottles in the club. That's what winners do.
Hey.
And on that note, hey, Jay, dude, this has been fabulous. Really enjoyed it. Thanks a mil.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Dave Sims from the Hey Now podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us here on the Hey Now podcast.
I can't stand